Hey there! Welcome back to Color and Craft Haven, a little corner of calm where we can slow down, breathe, and add a little color to the day. One of the funniest things about coloring is that we spend a surprising amount of time worrying about whether we're doing it correctly. Think about that for a moment. We're sitting down with a book full of dragons, flowers, castles, mushrooms, owls wearing tiny hats, and occasionally a squirrel that appears to have accidentally wandered into a fantasy kingdom. And somehow our biggest concern is whether we pick the proper shade of green. Coloring is supposed to be relaxing, yet many of us have experienced that moment where we stare at a page and think, what if I ruin it? Today we're talking about when it makes sense to follow the lines, follow the intended design, and when it might be time to throw caution to the wind and let your creativity wander off into the forest unsupervised. Let's start with why following the lines exists in the first place. The lines are not your enemy. They're not tiny artistic prison bars designed to crush your spirit. The lines are actually helpful little guides. They're like those friendly signs in a national park that point you toward the trailhead. You don't have to follow every trail forever. But if you're new to the area, it's nice to know where the path begins. Coloring books provide structure. The artist has already done the drawing. The composition is already balanced, the shapes are already established. That means you can focus on color choices, shading, blending, and enjoying the process instead of figuring out how to draw an anatomically correct dragon wing, which, let's be honest, is probably for the best. For beginners especially, following the lines can be incredibly freeing. That sounds backwards, but it really isn't. When there are fewer decisions to make, the brain often relaxes. Imagine being handed a completely blank sheet of paper and being told to create something beautiful. Some people get excited. Other people immediately hear the Windows error sound in their head. A coloring page gives you a place to start. The decisions become more manageable. What color should the flower be? What color should the sky be? Those questions feel much less intimidating than please invent art from nothing. Structure can actually support creativity instead of limiting it. There's also something wonderfully satisfying about staying inside the lines. I know we like to pretend we're all rebels, but there is a deep and ancient joy in neatly filling a space with color. It's the same satisfaction people get from organizing bookshelves, lining up storage containers, or successfully fitting leftovers into exactly the right size container. When the color goes exactly where you intend it to go, your brain rewards you with a tiny burst of happiness. It's a simple pleasure, but simple pleasures are often the best kind. Nobody needs to climb Mount Everest every day. Sometimes it's enough to successfully color a mushroom cap without turning the surrounding leaves red. But here's where things get interesting. Following the lines is a tool, not a law. Somewhere along the way, many creative people accidentally convince themselves that coloring books come with invisible rules. Suddenly there are expectations. Grass must be green. Trees must be brown. Cats should probably resemble cats, and dragons should obey biology despite being dragons. Before long, we're treating fantasy illustrations like scientific field guides. Meanwhile, the dragon is sitting there wondering why everyone insists its scales can't be purple with gold polka dots. If you're coloring for enjoyment, there is no coloring police waiting outside with a citation book and a disappointed expression. One of the first ways people begin breaking the rules is through color choices. This is often where creative freedom quietly sneaks in. Maybe your owl is teal. Maybe your rabbit is bright blue. Maybe your castle looks like it was designed by someone who had unlimited access to pink paint and absolutely no self-control. Wonderful. Art allows us to explore possibilities that reality doesn't provide. A purple forest isn't realistic, but it might be beautiful. A rainbow fox isn't something you'll find in nature, but it might create a page that makes you smile every time you see it. Creativity often starts with asking, what if? Breaking the rules can also help you develop confidence. Many people spend years waiting for permission to try something different. The truth is that permission has already been granted. The coloring book is in your hands. You are the supreme ruler of that page. You can declare all the clouds are orange now. You can establish a kingdom where every mushroom glows blue. You can create a landscape that appears to be designed by a caffeinated unicorn with unrestricted access to glitter. Nobody can stop you. The more you experiment, the more you learn what styles, colors, and combinations genuinely appeal to you. Sometimes breaking the lines happens literally. This can be terrifying the first time you do it. Maybe you decide to add a shadow where none existed. Maybe you extend a pattern into a neighboring section. Maybe you add stars, dots, sparkles, vines, or tiny decorative details. Suddenly you're not just coloring anymore. You're collaborating with the original artwork. Some people discover that this is where the real magic begins. The page transforms from something you're filling in to something you're helping create. It becomes uniquely yours. Now, I should mention that creative freedom does not require chaos. There's a difference between intentional experimentation and randomly grabbing colors while laughing like a supervillain. Both approaches are valid if you're having fun, but intentional choices often produce the results people enjoy most. When you decide to break a rule, it can help to ask why. Are you creating contrast, setting a mood, exploring a color combination, telling a story? Those little decisions add depth to your work. Even wildly imaginative pages can feel cohesive when there's a thoughtful idea behind them. One of the biggest myths in coloring is the idea that mistakes ruin pages. Let's talk about that for a minute because it's just not true. Most mistakes are only mistakes because we decide they are. Have you ever accidentally colored the wrong section and then spent 10 minutes staring at it like you've caused an international incident? Meanwhile, another person would look at that same exact page and think it was intentional. Art is full of happy accidents. Sometimes the color you didn't mean to use ends up becoming your favorite part of the entire page. Creativity often rewards curiosity more than perfection. This is especially important for people who use coloring as a form of relaxation. If the goal is stress relief, then stressing about coloring defeats the purpose. Imagine taking a bubble bath and spending the entire time worrying about whether the bubbles are performing correctly. That would be ridiculous. Yet people do the artistic equivalent of that all the time. They worry about every color choice, every line, every tiny detail. The page becomes a test instead of an experience. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is remind yourself that nobody is grading your mushroom. Another reason to break the rules occasionally is that it keeps the hobby fresh. Repeating the same approach can become comfortable, but comfortable often slides into boredom. Trying something different can reignite excitement. Use colors you normally avoid. Create unusual lighting effects. Invent a color palette based on a sunset, a favorite beverage, or that one sweater you own that somehow matches absolutely nothing else that you possess. Experiments don't always succeed, but they almost always teach you something. At the very least, they create stories you'll laugh about later. There's also a wonderful middle ground between following the rules and completely abandoning them. Many experienced colorists live in that space. They use the lines as a foundation while still allowing themselves room to play. Maybe they follow the structure of the page but choose unconventional colors. Maybe they respect the original design but add their own little details. Maybe they stay inside the lines while creating dramatic lighting that completely changes the mood. Creative freedom doesn't have to be all or nothing. Sometimes the most interesting work comes from balancing guidance with exploration. The longer you stay in any creative hobby, the more you realize that personal enjoyment matters far more than imaginary standards. There will always be someone who colors differently, someone who uses techniques you've never tried, someone whose pages look nothing like yours, or even better than yours. That's perfectly fine. The goal isn't to become a copy of someone else or to outdo everyone else on the planet. The goal is to create something that brings you satisfaction. If that means realistic forests, wonderful. If that means neon pink trees inhabited by turquoise squirrels who pay taxes to a crystal dragon, that's wonderful too. At the end of the day, knowing when to follow the lines and when to break them comes down to one simple question. What serves your enjoyment of the creative process? Sometimes structure is exactly what we need. Sometimes experimentation is exactly what we need. The beauty of coloring is that it can offer both. You can spend one evening carefully staying inside every line and another evening turning an ordinary garden scene into a psychedelic masterpiece that looks like it escaped from another dimension. Neither approach is wrong. The page belongs to you. The colors belong to you. The experience belongs to you. That's the real freedom hiding inside every coloring book. That's it for today's colorful time. I'd love to hear whether you're a careful line follower, a creative rule breaker, or a little bit of both. So leave a comment and let me know. Take care, stay creative, and I'll see you on the next one.